Hello and welcome. Let's see, how do I change the light? Nope. Yep. Whoa. Yes. Maybe. Sure. Good enough. I have a halo now. Whoa, now you can't see me. I should just do the filters. Focus on my face. Okay. So, I tried to pick an appropriate setting for tonight's Facebook Live since we're talking about stress and the microbiome. So, I'm on my porch, which is beautiful. Give you a little tour. Well, just kidding. We're back. Apparently, my super great stress-free location, I'm sitting on the porch, does not have great Wi-Fi, so you're welcome, husband. I'm using all of our data for this video. So we're talking about stress and the microbiome, both how the microbiome affects stress and how stress affects the microbiome, right? It's a two-way street, just like with anything. Making sure I'm live. And so I decided to sit on my porch for this talk. I have a drink. I'm relaxed, right? I'm in a comfy place. I have my comfy pants on. And I'm using this moment, despite the fact that I'm doing my job, to do some self-care and to de-stress. I have my favorite sweatshirt on. The birds are chirping. Wait. Yep, they're chirping. The ducks are quacking. I could actually hear horses. No, I don't live in Little House on the Prairie, but it kind of seems like it. So, stress is a biggie. And it also kind of gets a bad rap. So, stressors do not necessarily have to be bad things, right? Getting married, having a kid, gosh, that's stressful. Exercising, having a new job, exploring new places. Those are all stressful events, and they put stress on our body, but they're things that stretch us and help us grow. So that's a normal stress, right? The problem is when we are chronically exposed to stressors or stress, we get stuck in this kind of negative feedback loop. So let me describe to you kind of how stress works. So our body's job is to maintain homeostasis. That basically just means a balance. It's always striving for homeostasis. Even when we've got full-blown autoimmune disease or whatever else, we're striving for balance in all things. And so sometimes in my practice, what I do is I help the roadblocks get out of the way so that the body can reach a homeostatic balance. But when the body can't, then we get kicked into the stress response. If it can't maintain balance. And basically, this has to do with this HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal. And so if you've heard of adrenal fatigue, which is really popular right now, popular to have, I guess, I would pass if you have a choice. It's this HPA axis. It's how the body gets signaled to have a stress response and how the physical reactions to that stress. It includes increase in blood sugar because we need this immediate energy. It suppresses the immune system. It tightens down, it reduces effectiveness of digestion. It doesn't put that as a priority. It enhances fat and protein metabolism. Lots and lots and lots of things happen when we're in this stress response, which is a good thing because it's designed to protect our body from impending doom and danger. So I like to describe it as the zebra analogy, right? So we have a zebra. He's munching on some grass. He or she, right? Munching on some grass, digesting, body is functioning, metabolism's working, all these things are great. If it's a girl, maybe she's getting ready to ovulate and her hormones are doing things, zebra hormones. And then a lion comes. And the lion starts chasing the zebra, switches into fight or flight from the parasympathetic rest and digest mood and it's got to have quick energy. It needs blood rushes to the organs to protect it. That's that vagal response you get if you get scared and you get queasy. All the blood rushes to your stomach and you get lightheaded, or your fingers tingle or something like that. And so it's running for its life. It's not worried about getting pregnant while running away from the lion, especially if it's the boy zebra. Not worried about digesting its food effectively and getting all the nutrients out of it. Not worried about that. And then the blood sugar and all that stuff goes crazy, right? Then, in our story, the zebra gets away. The zebra gets away, and he goes back to rest and digest, out of fight or flight. The problem with us in this westernized society, both due to dietary insufficiencies, lifestyle choices, right? So we get, we have a stressful commute or a stressful morning, hurrying up to get the kids out the door. We down some coffee, which stimulates the excitatory part of our bodies that pushes us more into fight or flight. We rush out the door. We have important emails or phone calls to make, or if we're a stay-at-home mom or a dad or anything like that, we've got to deal with all these stressors. Then we are constantly stimulated by screens, cars, driving, action movies. I love a good shoot 'em up movie as much as anyone else. But we're constantly in this cycle of stress, and we get stuck there. Guess what happens when we're stuck there? We're not digesting appropriately. We're having hormone mess ups. We start getting fatigued. So if we last too long in this and we don't get down to rest and digest, we start experiencing chronic fatigue and pain and all of these other concerns. So that's the problem with chronic exposures to stress. This includes psychological stress. So they've done some really interesting research studies on maternal separation, bullying, being in crowded situations in overpopulated areas, heat, like not having a stable temperature or not knowing where your food is coming from, those kind of psychological, emotional stresses. And they can actually see those as changing the composition of the microbiota in the GI. So just that kind of chronic exposure to stress, or we have a stressful job, or we have stressful relationships like a marriage or a family member or our kids. My kids stress me out sometimes. It's okay. But that chronic stress, without being able to manually get ourselves out of it over time, really wears us down. And it destroys this healthy bacteria because they aren't getting priority. They're not getting the nutrients they need. We're not getting exposure to these phytochemicals and all that stuff. So I think it's really interesting that everyone has their own stress tolerance, right? And a lot of that is because it's formed, guess what, with the microbiome when they're young. What are some good examples? So this is kind of a sad one, going deep quickly. Sexual abuse, emotional or physical abuse when you're in your toddler or preschool ages. There is a direct correlation between that and eating disorders, microbiome disruptants, obesity, and all of these other concerns. It is a huge part emotional, but the microbiome aspect is massive because this trauma literally strips the good bacteria, and then all you do is populate with harmful pathogenic species or colonies, I guess, that then perpetuate these health concerns, this chronic inflammation, which you'll learn about in the gut-brain one, is another negative feedback loop, right? So stress kills the microbiome, but an imbalanced microbiome also doesn't let our body have an appropriate response to stress. Our stress tolerance is much, much smaller. I had a good one. Where was it? Oh yeah, and that's the other thing, is that stress makes the gut more permeable. So we've talked about those epithelial barrier, right? That's so important. And having it, the major way that stress affects our health as far as like microbiome stuff goes, is that it degrades this epithelial barrier, and then we get all of our inflammation, autoimmune, all of that stuff. Of course, when you think about irritable bowel, right? So upset, nervous tummy, there's a huge correlation to stress. Stress both triggers it and it triggers stress. Like if you've ever had some kind of like, gut problem and you're like worried about getting to the bathroom on time, that's a very stressful event. But stress itself also then triggers, because of this vagus nerve that goes from the gut to the brain, it triggers this like dumping syndrome, this explosion of guts, right? And that's largely because there's no cushion of the good bacteria to mediate this stress response. We just become more and more susceptible to small stressors. So they did this study with mice. Oh my gosh, you guys, these poor mice. I do all of this research about these notobiotic germ-free mice, and I just feel so bad for them because we're like making their lives living hell. These poor little mice dudes. But they did a study with the germ-free mice, and the germ-free mice, as opposed to their counterparts that had normal gut bacteria or whatever, they just had normal, they didn't do anything fancy to it. But the germ-free mice, when they were put into a situation with light stressors, and I don't know what that means to a scientist, I'm sure I could look it up. I think it's like the maze that they normally run, like jiggles, or maybe there's a cat in the room, or it's dark, or something like that. They actually tested their like neurochemicals and saw that they were having massive anxiety. They saw that they were displaying signs of depression based on their like serotonin levels and all of these things, just based on a small amount of stress influence. And then the regular mice were like, yeah, they had a moment of stress, right? They're put into the stress response, this HPA axis kind of thing, the hypothalamic thing is talking to the whatever, and the adrenals are saying, okay, release more glucosteroids and let's figure this out. And then they move out and they go on. So it just goes to show, right? The same things I've been saying over and over again. It's all about diversity, quantity, and quality. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah. So you and I could be put under the same stressors and we would react differently. It doesn't mean we have to have the same species, but they've done a ton of strain-specific research, and I put that all in your guys' lecture this week that talks about each particular strain for depression, anxiety, increasing resilience and stress response. Because what's going to happen is you're going to run out of room if we keep pushing this stress barrier and we don't refill our bucket. So what are some ways that we can refill our bucket, right? Sit outside, have a moment, be intentional. Self-care is one of those things that people don't always expect to talk about when they come to a nutritionist, but it's totally on the list, because you are not going to, even if we do all of this work to recolonize the microbiome and we figure out your core imbalance, and we get you on the exact right supplement and you're eating the foods that your body super needs, and we figured all those things out, if we don't deal with how stress inputs are coming in and going, hopefully getting out, then you're going to build up to something else. Maybe not the same health concern, but it will be something else. So strategies for self-care and making margin in your life. So we had a pastor one time that I love how he talked about this. I'm talking about pastor, and I have my drink out here. But we had a pastor one time that talked about creating margin in your life, and that's what I think about when I think about the microbiome. It really has to do with creating space in our lives so that our bodies can find homeostatic balance and heal. And that sounds kind of hippie of me, and I suppose that's okay. Ways we can do that. You can actually manually get yourself from the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, right? Our blood sugar is up. The glucosteroids, which I was going to talk about, but I didn't, they increase. So those chronic stress increases your production of glucosteroids. We've got too much. It burns out the adrenal glands, which they're the ones that are supposed to, let us know if it's really a life-threatening situation or it's just a TV drama or something like that, right? That we're having an emotional response to. But we get those glucosteroid production up, and all of a sudden, we have increased risk of osteoporosis, hypertension, dyslipidemia, which just means too much bad cholesterol, too high triglycerides. We've got this fat imbalance. Our body's not processing it appropriately. It's holding on, right? Because we talked about this fat metabolism that happens when we're in fight or flight. And of course, neurodegeneration. So our brains, which we like, right? And we want to work as long as our bodies are working. And so because all of those, like Alzheimer's and those kind of concerns, dementia, are these inflammatory diseases that they can correlate so many times back down to the core of our body and our health, right, which is the gut. Those are things that we can actually help prevent by creating margin in our lives at 5 years old, right? Learning those good habits. So I skipped it, but I was getting there. Things you can do to actually manually put yourself back into the parasympathetic, calming, rest and digest nervous system. You can do quick meditations. I am not great at meditating, but I do it because I can actually tell a physical difference in how I respond to my environment. Aviva Ram. So I was going to type these things for you guys. I'm getting super good at this, you guys. Aviva Ram has something called the Quickie. You can Google it. It's not exactly what it sounds like. It's not at all what it sounds like. Although sex is good for reducing stress, and I recommend you do it frequently with someone that you love. And I got distracted by sex. Sorry. So the Quickie, which is actually just a quick meditation that you do some breathing, just 4 to 5 deep breaths with focusing on something positive. Actually, you can put a little stimulator on your brain and you can test, and your body will move from sympathetic to sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system to rest and digest. How we talk to ourselves actually affects us on a cellular level, even how we think about ourselves. So I think I told you about Raphael Kelman, who was the founder of this great institute or whatever, Kelman Institute. And he actually talks to his bacteria every day in a positive manner because he feels like they are so crucial for his survival that he's going to be nice to them. And the same can be said for our bodies, right? When we are at a negative balance with our bodies, if we are doing harmful behaviors by looking in the mirror and picking out our flaws and beating ourselves up for that food choice that we made or all those things, it's counterintuitive to our goals. Because if you're saying, oh my gosh, you big fat lard, you shouldn't eat that cake is going to turn more into fat than if you had said, man, that was not really my goal, but it was delicious and that was a super fun birthday party, and I'm going to really try to make a different choice next time. Your body metabolically is going to deal with those sugar and carbs differently. Chew on that. So, quick meditations can manually put us from fight or flight into rest and digest, and we can see in the microflora of the gut, if you want to test your poop every week with making these changes, it will change. Commensal bacteria will increase even without many dietary changes and those kind of things, and pathogenic bacteria will decrease. Diversity will start increasing. All those things, quantity, all that stuff. So another thing that you can do to deal with your stress response, right, is to be outside. Ta-da! You can do tapping. So this is kind of a new phenomenon, and I don't have a ton of research on it, but it involves positive affirmations and touching consistently, gentle, loving touches, not like punching yourself in the face, your body. What are some other things? Oh, we talked about well, that was kind of in the gut health lecture. Oh, shoot. You can make sure that you are getting enough fat. So there's something very neuroprotective about good quality fats. They reduce inflammation and they support healthy microbiota as well as just general feelings of well-being. What happens when we get stressed out, right, and we get exhausted is that we go for caffeine and sugar because our body is crying out. We've used it all up in our stress, HPA axis stress out, freak out time. And it actually continues the cycle of getting us stuck in there, because guess what it does? It erodes the microbiome, feeds those like quick energy excitatory parts of ourselves, and then we just keep going around and around and around in this, stuck in this HPA axis nightmare. I imagine it like a fun house where you just can't get out. That's what's being stuck in this, negative feedback loop is like. You can look at adaptogens. So adaptogens are one of my favorites. I was going to write those down for you. Well, I'll do it later. Adaptogens are specific herbs that help modulate the stress response in our bodies. You may have heard of like ashwagandha. That's one of them. It's kind of the most popular one. But they increase our stress resilience so that while we are working on other aspects, while we are creating margin, while we are finding ways daily, multiple times, which seems overwhelming to some people, to do self-care things. It can just be sitting in the car for 5 extra minutes before you come in the house because there's a great song on the radio, and you see that act as self-care. Up to getting massages, having a bath with Epsom salts, reading a book when you probably should be working on that, memo? What do normal people that have normal jobs do? I don't know. So all of those things are good choices. Self-care is huge. Ashwagandha, other adaptogenic herbs can be really supportive for this HPA axis, because what happens is there's an adrenal and thyroid connection. So when our adrenals kind of kaput, if we've been under chronic stress or we experienced a trauma and then did not rebuild ourselves up, we'll just continue to kind of go down the rabbit hole. When I work with my really complex clients, we take their biggest concern at face value for what it is, and we deal with that symptom. But what happens is we usually often work back down like an onion, right? So people are onions. And these layers, we go down and down and down, and a new symptom will pop up until we really get back to this core trauma. Because just like our emotions are stored in our fat and our toxins are stored in our fat, our stress response, our lack thereof, if we just are completely burnt out and stress is just literally going straight to cortisol, and we have all this super imbalance that's disrupting our sleep and acting like little bullets in our body of inflammation, until we get back to that core, we can't really build back up. So we can do all of these little band-aids, right? We can put band-aids on for, I took this vitamin for a little while and I felt a little bit better. Or I did green juices and it was awesome and I had so much energy, but, as soon as I went back to eating, Taco Bell or whatever else, I started having those migraines again and whatever else. So dealing with stress response that way is huge. And then, of course, pro and prebiotics are massively supportive for the stress response. They have done, I think I have 6 at least in the references for this course on just stress and the microbiome and introduction of strain-specific probiotics, and of course prebiotics, which feed the good bacteria. Those shifts alone increase our resilience and our adaptability, because what we need is cognitive sensitivity. Maybe elasticity is a good word. I'm going like this. I'm thinking of the taffy pull. Right? The Oregon coast. Is anyone else craving taffy right now? And so things like that. So I would love to hear from you guys, because there's several people on here. What things do you do for self-care? Or any questions that you have, because I could talk about this for a long time, but since there's people here, I might as well ask, what kind of things you're interested in knowing about. So we've got our stress, we've got our adaptogens, we've got dealing with inflammation and the microbiome health, which is going to directly respond to how we respond to our environment. Everything from, skin reactions to what are some other things we do when we're stressed out? Oh, like a stress response. Have you ever been startled and you yell or say something inappropriate or grab something or you want to punch someone and you're like, whoa, that was a short fuse. I mean, we're just kind of worn down if our microbiota is not diverse, or if we have this leaky barrier where our bacteria dudes are going where they need to not go. What are some other things? Oh yeah, that's another thing I put on your lecture this week was training the vagus nerve to communicate a little bit better, and not just send, so that we can actually get some good communication between the brain and the gut, especially once we heal the gut. Because just like in the body, where inflammation feeds inflammation and we become this cycle, even if we remove the thing that had been creating inflammation, we've still got this one over here, right? That was the inflammation that was feeding the inflammation. The stressors are the same way too. So you can sometimes remove stressors from your life. Oh, this is a good question. Has anybody ever been that kind of person that, you're fine, except for then when the stress is removed, like you had finals in school, or right after you got married or gave birth, or right after a big deadline or a show or something important, then you get sick, right? Because we're having this rebound response to finally having the stressor removed. That's always super fun when it's like spring break and Christmas break and you're always sick all the time. And I have in my intake questionnaire, I always ask a set of questions that kind of dives into the stress response. And so you can say, hey man, I have 9 out of 10 of those symptoms. Maybe I need to give some more love to my adrenals. And they actually really like colored salt, which some of the people on here know. If the microbiome is off, does it affect your muscles or old injuries? Muscles, yes. Old injuries, I would say yes as well, because we need short-chain fatty acids for collagen synthesis. So when people drink bone broth or take collagen or do those kind of things to lubricate the joints or to fight inflammation in old areas of injury, we're not, those are things that we should be getting by the byproducts of the microbiome. So, and because that, I'm assuming it's like pain, so it's an inflammatory response, it's absolutely regulated by inflammatory cytokines, which are meant to be, circulated and appropriately disposed of by the gut and all of those things, as opposed to just circulate around. I've had people talk about, so when they go through a detox group with me or something like that, they'll be like, okay, so I hurt my knee in college playing football, and then, but I did the surgeries and whatever else and it was fine, and then I did your detox and my knee was sore and it swelled up and all of those things. And it's kind of this healing process, like I said, when we're with the onion and we're working our way layer by layer back, we kind of bring up those things that maybe weren't necessarily resolved. Maybe there was low-lying, we can have really low-lying infections that we don't have actual on-site symptoms from, but that are causing an inflammatory response in our body, just not enough of one, especially if we're immunocompromised or anything like that, that is not going to fight the infection. And so we kind of bring those things up. I did a detox recently with someone that had a history of sinus infections, but really bad ones, but she hasn't had them in 8 years. And she did the detox with me and a microbiome makeover, just really, it was pretty aggressive. We're just going to flip the switch for her and we were going to change her trajectory and it was going to be great. And she said she had buckets and buckets worth of clear drainage just pouring from her nose, so much that she could barely go to work because she was fighting this infection. And we realized after some time that that was one of the triggers that was keeping her from actually losing weight, was this low-lying infection that she had probably had for almost a decade. And it turned into a full-blown something or other that then we were able to address and finally get it out. But I would say, as far as inflammatory response goes, yes. And muscles for sure, because we talked about those tight junctions, which are not in a good place if our microbiome is imbalanced. And those antigens that get through and then create immune complexes, they go and they chill in the muscles and the joints, and they cause pain and inflammation, and that can be a big trigger. So I've talked to people that have had a bad case of food poisoning, and then all of a sudden they get fibromyalgia or something like that. It was just kind of the tipping point for them to trigger a pain response or something. That was a super long answer for a short question. Sorry. I just get so wordy. I can't help it. I love it because I'm I'm queen of the stage. I don't have to compete for attention. That was a good question. Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Nutrient deficiencies also play a key role in the stress response. If we're deficient, we'll have anxiety, depression. When you're like, I should not be stressed out about this. Why can I not be? A lot of times it's nutrient deficiencies that our body is. We've shortened the rope, right, between a normal input and then an output. So we have the output of someone's chasing me with a knife, when it's really someone is following us in the parking garage, but we should be a little bit cautious and nervous, but not be so scared we have a heart attack or something like that. Although we only have one parking garage in Tri-Cities and it's very well lit, so that's probably not a huge concern for most of you. Oh, all right. Awesome. All right, well, unless anybody has more questions, doesn't have to be about stress, although I have a lot of information about stress because I think it's one of the things that's keeping people from achieving true health and wellness, even when they're making good decisions. You should be able to have a little bit of resilience. You should be able to, go to Mexico and eat too many tacos and drink too many margaritas or something like that, and then, rebound and make good choices again. Or life will happen, right? Things will come up in our lives that cause and trigger stress cascades, big ones. But being able to function through those and not have those trigger chronic disease. So that's the really big one, is that, stressors will happen, good and bad. And how we deal and cope with them is going to really change whether we internalize them and they hijack our metabolism and our body systems, or whether we cycle them through. So I have more coping mechanisms if you want those, or we can just say au revoir. Awesome. Okay, so make sure to create margin in your life. Take some time, get your prebiotics and your probiotics on board, and find self-care. Identify potential nutrient deficiencies. You can download that chronometer app on your phone or your computer. I'll type the name. And you can, it's kind of like MyFitnessPal, but it's like 1,000 million times better. And you can check to see what your intake is like. That's not going to give you an idea of your genetics, like if you're genetically predisposed to have low zinc or something like that. Vitamin D is a really big one. We do not have good stress response when we have low vitamin D, and we have low vitamin D if we live in the Pacific Northwest, including even our kind of deserty, sunny place here. And you can get your vitamin D checked at a doctor. He will do that for you, or she will do that for you, or they will do that for you. And that's really crucial to maintaining resilience in the stress response and supporting the microbiome. Huge for supporting the microbiome and vitamin D. eating those colors, right? The flavonoids and the phytonutrients that feed our bodies. And then sometimes sit outside. Even when it's just a little too much cold. Too much coldly? Too cold. And those actions of putting your feet in the dirt and being outside will change the microbiome and increase your resilience to stress and the stress response. So, I have tons more work to do for you guys for this class, since it's technically almost over. So I'll make sure to get all of that stuff done, and then you guys will have access to the Teachable, which is going to be fantastic. I'm doing a great job on making that be super good for you guys. And then I'll keep adding things as we go. The dairy-free coconut yogurt will be up soon. I just had some. It was delicious. And I'm hoping to get a few different recipes for you as well, because I only showed you one way of it so far, and I know there's people that would like some more info on the dairy-free for sure. My experiments with cashew and almond milk have been thus failures. So if anyone has recipes, like you're better at me than this, I would love some tips, because dudes, I'm having great success with coconut, all the things, but there are people that are sensitive to coconut, and I want to be mindful of that. So finding an alternative has been somewhat challenging if you want it to actually be thick. I can make you a dairy-free yogurt that has life culture and probiotics, but it's like good for smoothies, and that's about it. So anyways, talk to you guys soon. There'll be a little feedback survey coming up shortly, and you can be entered to win a free cooking class, a Thai cooking class online that I developed, which is actually really fun, and because of course I'm in it. So anyways, if you guys come up with more questions, let me know. The 5R will be up again. I'm getting close to the deadline, so pretty soon. And I appreciate you guys all and your questions. See ya.